Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. I'm not sure we're live yet. Let me wait for the spinny thing to stop, and then we will go. Here we are. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to our education series. I found it to be pretty timely for two reasons. First of all, everyone should be considering how their child met or did not meet their IEP goals from last year during distance learning. Most kids are behind, or their goals are not being measured, their progress wasn't measured. Most districts are not retesting until the fall. So it is helpful to at least do a consultation, if not more, with some of the people at school. Um, it can be informal and basically discuss things that can be done over the summer. If your child is on an extended school year program, of course, there's a coordinator, a new person who can help you with distance learning, um, and get everything in place to get your child to where they uh, should be, make up some of the ground. It's very, very important when you think about where the IEP that you did last year, where it set the goals, and the what the how the progress was going to be measured. That you look at that or have a school professional look at that in order to know if your child is entitled to compensatory education to make up for that lost time. A lot of school districts are saying, oh, but we had our distance learning in place within a week of the closure. So we did what we have to do. Well, if you get a bunch of packets at your house in a week, but you have no idea what to do with them, then they haven't delivered instruction. And in that is a decision that's made on a fact, a case by case, fact by fact basis. It's really important. However, in promulgating IEPs, and especially if distance learning is considered in them, to have a routine, to have a quiet space dedicated to learning, to take breaks as the child's attention is distracted or changing as the instruction is going on, and also to be a little creative. A lot of kids learn more with touch than they do with sight. So some of the sensory changes that you can make it the whole process a lot easier. For example, if you have a young child who's just learning their letters, it's much more fun to um, do it more, either put a bunch of shaving cream, you can even do it outside and not make a mess, um, out on a plate or on a platter or on a cookie sheet or on the cement, and just have them draw with their finger different letters. You can use baby powder. You can use baking soda. You can, another fun thing to do is to have a hunt and give your child a bag and hide letters all over the yard. They have to collect them, put them in the bag, and then they and then when they come in, they have to put them in order, and and you're going to have to take breaks in between, but this is, all it can just all be one continuous game with breaks. You could be, if they're magnetic, you could then stick them on the washing machine or the refrigerator. You can ask them to pull out the letters and spell their name. You can put, if they're learning their sight words, you can put, the sight word up there, and ask them to identify it when there's no picture. So those are some great and helpful resources that I can recommend for you to do. But what I want to talk to you about today is really the four key types of learners, because as you all know that an IEP is not just the way a child is going to be taught. It also has to incorporate how the child learns. And so the right resources, the right supports, the right accommodations are incorporated in that individual child's curriculum. Remember, this is individualized, so it has to do with each student and their particular diagnoses or certifications or other factors. It could be that they have really bad allergies and they have a runny nose all the time and it interferes with learning. That's kind of extreme, but these things are important. So um, today we're going to talk about um, the vark model, which are basically four key types of learning. And it's the visual learners, the auditory learners, reading and writing learners, and kinesthetic learners. And that's VARK, those four. Um, and the through the 70s and 80s, this concept sort of emerged to suggest that personal learning preferences should be considered. And at that time, they said that it actually didn't matter. But now that is different. And in existing research, it has been found that matching teaching methods to learning styles, it does influence educational outcomes. And the concept of learning styles, although it's unpopular, is important. And there's a bunch of different ways to classify learning styles. Um, the vark is what I just told you about. There's another one called the Kolb, KOLB. There's another one called the Fleming, and it's really just going to depend on which inventory your school uses to assess, if they even assess on learning styles. I think a lot of times parents or caregivers have a better idea of learning style because they're, constantly in play mode, hoping that kids will learn, where educators are usually in education mode, hoping they can make it fun. So it's just a different perspective, and it really can make a difference, I believe, especially with the kinesthetic learners who just do so much better if they're feeling and touching and moving than if they're just, looking at the learning source. When they're interactive and they're part of the learning, they tend to have their attention directed in the right place most for a longer period of time, which is obviously really important. Um, so, to figure out what type of learner a child is, there's a self-report inventory that was designed by the Fleming crew, and that's Fleming with one M, in case you're interested in looking it up. And basically, uh, it is imagine you're learning how to perform a new physical skill, such as riding a bike or dancing a certain style of dance. In which way would you learn the skill the best? Would it be looking at the picture of the people performing the skill, listening to an expert explain how to do the task, reading about how to perform the task in a book, or watching someone else perform the task and then trying it yourself? So that's sort of in this self-report inventory. That is how those are the types of questions that that are asked, and those four categories of people uh, reflecting on how they would learn best. And so, essentially, the first one was the visual learner, the second one was the auditory learner, et cetera, et cetera. Hands-on experience is always the kinesthetic learner, and that's spelled KINESTHETIC, if you want to look that up later. So first, let's talk about visual learners. Visual learners learn best by seeing, and they do great with graphs and charts and diagrams and illustrations, handouts, videos. Those are all really helpful tools for visual learners. Um, they would rather see information as opposed to having to read it. Um, rather than it being in written form. They like it just delivered in a different different mechanism. They also pay close attention to body language. Anything that can put into art or beauty or aesthetics can help. And if people are visual learners, if they see it, it's easier for them to remember. Next, we have oral or auditory learners. These are the learners that learn best by hearing the information. So these are the people who can learn everything from a podcast and remember it for the rest of their life. I'm not one of those people. But these auditory learners are people who do very well in a lecture setting. Rather than reading a textbook, they can read out loud to remember the information better. They prefer listening to a recording of the class instruction rather than going over class notes. And a lot of times they create songs to help them remember information. For the reading and writing learners, they prefer their information displayed as words or texts, and they everything is primarily text based. They read through the following questions and answer yes to them. If you find reading your textbook to be a great way to learn new information, then you are this type of learner. If you take a lot of notes during class while reading the textbook, you are a reading writing learner. If you enjoy making lists, reading definitions, and creating presentations, you are a reading writing learner. Do you prefer it when teachers make use of overheads and handouts? That again would make you a reading writing learner. And then there's the kinesthetic learners or tactile learners. And these are the students who learn best by touching and doing. Hands-on experience is really important. They like to manipulate objects and materials. It's difficult for them to sit for long periods of time. The more involved they can be in the tactile aspect of the learning, the longer they should be able to stay focused. But focus and attention is definitely an issue with kinesthetic learners. They're really good at applied activities like painting, cooking, mechanics, sports, woodworking, gym, and other opportunities like that. And they can learn almost anything, but it's going to take practice. There is in all of these different learning styles have been recognized, but the scales that determine what type of learning style you have are not as frequently accepted. And all the models suggest that the instruments that assess them are very questionable, and there's no real controls to determine who falls in which group or what testing is appropriate to affirmatively confirm that someone is in that group. But lack of empirical support aside, the vark model is fairly popular, and especially when you're in a situation with children with disabilities in different learning styles, it's very, very helpful to know how they learn so that you can give input to the team, the IEP team, as to what would work best for your child. And and remember, if you give a suggestion at the IEP meeting and you are hoping for learning to be delivered in a certain way and it's not, or the team won't put it in the IEP, you can request in writing for it to be put in the parent concerns section. The parent concerns section should really include everything. The final areas that I wanted to talk about is if your child is a different learner and the instruction is not being delivered in an individualized manner, then we may have to go to court to get the proper supports and accommodations in place in order for your child to receive their free and appropriate public education, FAPE. So what happens is there's an established custodial environment, and that and within that, and I'm sorry, I have my wrong pages here. And we would look at in this setting, we would look at what's in the IEP and where the child is not progressing. We should ask for assessments in those particular areas so that they can have a complete and comprehensive speech and language evaluation. They can have a complete and comprehensive functional behavioral assessment. They can have a complete and comprehensive assessment of their reading comprehension, writing comprehension, if their ability to identify shapes, draw shapes. And with some of the disabilities, part of the disability itself is that the child loses focus or is stimulated by too many things at one time while they're supposed to be on task. So we have to be aware, if a child begins to draw a circle and they don't stop where they started, there's many explanations of why that can happen. But if the child, and what they do is they just go like this, around and around and around. And so it is really important to observe how your child learns, observe how your child receives education, and how does your child reward him or herself, and how do they succeed? Because reinforcement is an excellent way to get kids to learn, to get kids to curb their behavior. Checklists, making a to-do list and having the child, check off their tasks as they go through the day, whether they're educational or their chores at home, or it could just be, smiling at a friend. It could be anything, but that feeling and that self-esteem of accomplishing a task and being able to put the check mark there, and then knowing that every single task can be checked off, and then you get a sticker or a prize or an ice cream or whatever it is. This is what motivates kids to learn. And if we don't know what kind of learners they are, we can't motivate them in the right way. So remember, the bottom line is, in order for a child to have a free and appropriate public education, they absolutely must be identified as to how they learn, not just how the teachers are going to teach. And so with that, I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful day. And I will see you tomorrow as we continue to talk about education and ways that kids can be denied FAPE and what you do to get them the education that they are entitled to according to the law. Have a great day. Bye.